Good morning. In college, I took a class in contemplative writing and ended up being a research assistant for the professor working on the subject. I'm not the absolute most qualified person on this subject, but I do know a lot about it. So, what does it mean to write contemplatively? You might think it means you have to be super thoughtful without stopping. And that sounds very draining. In fact, the version of contemplative writing that I practiced is quite the opposite. It has very few requirements and is enjoyable. And when does and it replenishes emotional energies when I do it. So, what does it mean? What do I mean by contemplative writing? Contemplation isn't 100% deep thoughts. It's kind of like drinking a cup of tea. In fact, tea drinking is part of my contemplative practice. Um, you aren't all the time thinking deep thoughts when you're drinking tea. In fact, you might not think any deep thoughts. It's just the fact that you're doing this ritual, it can really aid to your contemplation. It also doesn't have to feel very important at the time. It is important because passing through one's thought is required to get to the second thought. Um, it doesn't have to be linear in process either. It can be done directly in fiction or poetry too. It doesn't have to just be prose. Some of my most rewarding contemplative writing memories in my class I took involve writing haiku, which feels to me as light as the poems are. It's like the lightest poem. But before we dig completely into the definition of contemplative writing, I would like for you to remember yourself in the process. You might be watching YouTube videos in part to get away from your world, but all contemplative writing is inherently about the person writing. You could be writing a contemplative academic paper about music, but you will inevitably creep into that writing who you are and your experiences singing songs or playing the clarinet. You could write contemplative fiction, but all fiction is laced with the writer's identity. And I use the word identity because contemplative writing is largely about identity. My fellow contemplating writing students were discovering about themselves as they wrote. One student learned in her writing to recognize that she does not identify as a Christian, the religion of her upbringing. One student explored his gay identity. When I was a contemplative writing student, I spent much of my writing exploring my mental health and thinking openly about what it means to have the diagnosis I have. If you are someone who already writes, you might be surprised to discover that much of the writing you already are doing is qualifiable as contemplative writing. I would say that all poetry has to be contemplative, and probably all memoir writing. Plus, if you've ever written in a journal or diary entry, that is definitely contemplation. There is a list of activities that are often paired with contemplative writing that includes journaling. And I mentioned tea drinking and rituals. Those are contemplative activities too. Journaling is inherently contemplative, and there are other activities that it is said to spur on and inspire contemplative writing. These activities include being in nature, walking, reading, folding an origami crane, to a certain amount traveling. Like traveling can be um it can be just like you're a tourist, but if you're like a pilgrim, then that is more like going on a pilgrimage is contemplative traveling. Immersing oneself in silence, going to a silent retreat, or making art or photography. There is something contemplative about all these activities. Of course, they can be done in a completely mindless fashion too, but they are said to be more likely to bring on moments of contemplation. So I hope this gives you a better feeling about what contemplative writing is and whether or not it is something you would like to do. I studied a lot of creative writing in college, and I took many courses starting in high school. After graduating, I have self published over 40 books. There is a contemplative angle to all of my writing. So I not only have experience that I can give you as a student of contemplative writing and a research assistant, I also have been a writer of contemplative writing a lot in my life, so I can share that with you. But really, sitting down with a defining reason of writing is something contemplative, is a task that it has been a while since I have done. What I mean is, most of what I write is contemplative, but writing with it in mind that I am writing something contemplative isn't something that I regularly do. It's a little higher in the field of writing, like a master's program of writing. So if you are watching this video and you want to write contemplatively, I would like to lead us, my viewers and me, in a moment of contemplative writing as you make your way off this video. Again, just keep in mind that it is anything that will help you grow as a person, expand your thought processes, and expand your thought processes. Um, and if you don't really feel like contemplative writing right off this video, why don't you go make a cup of tea or do something, one of the contemplative activities that might spur on later contemplative writing. So as this video ends, I would encourage you to settle into a moment of contemplative writing if you can. And be sure to write a comment and let me know how it goes. And if enough people are interested, I can do a part 2 or 3 of this video, and I can teach you a whole lot more on this subject. Thanks for watching. Happy writing.